Okay, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to the 2020 online Wasatch Wildlife Watch training series. Through these videos, we're going to hopefully provide you with the exact same training as we would in person at the Natural History Museum. And so these videos are going to be basically consisting of the different sections of the training. And for this first section, we are going to focus on the background of the study. For anybody that wants a refresher on why this study is ongoing, why it's important to contribute to it, or if you're new to the project, this will hopefully put everything into context for you so that you know why it is you're contributing to this project. And we really think that is incredibly important to this project and just for you to know in general, because this would not be done without you. We are gathering a ton of data through this project, and it is just an order of magnitude more than we can do as just a single research group. And so it is very important that you understand the contribution that you're making and that you understand the reasons why we think this project is so important and that your contribution to it is so vital to the conservation of the Wasatch. And so let's just get right into it. Like I said, this first video is going to be background mostly. So let me introduce myself. I'm Austin Green. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Utah. I work in the Biodiversity and Conservation Ecology Lab. That is run by a man named Can Şekercioglu. He is a Turkish wildlife biologist, and we focus mostly on international conservation with a community science tinge to it, basically. And a lot of the work we do is not in Utah. We focus a lot in a lot of different countries all over the world, but all of our work has a community science aspect to it. And that's because a lot of the work that we do is ecosystem-wide or community-wide, so it involves every single species in a community. And in order to have such large-scale conservation like that, you really have to have the entire backing of your entire community. And so that's why it's so important that we get people involved, we get volunteers involved, so we can gather tons and tons of data, but also so that we can have that backing to make those actual conservation findings that we explore through research come to life through applied management strategies. Another major player in this project is Wild Utah. Wild Utah Project is an absolutely instrumental partner in this project, and they basically coordinate the community science aspect of this. And so you'll notice that a lot of the communications that you'll receive come from Wild Utah Project. They are basically kind of coordinating the entire effort. The project page itself is housed on their website. So this is one of their major projects. And so we are basically kind of like co-runners of this, this larger project. And they have just been absolutely instrumental in this. Many of you know Mary Pendergast. She is working with us 100% of the time. This is one of her main projects, and without her, this project simply would not exist. And so if you don't know her already, hopefully you get a chance to meet her virtually through the webinar or possibly through one of these videos. But if not, I highly recommend reaching out to Wild Utah, reaching out to Mary, and just basically touching base with them because they are an absolutely incredible program. They have a ton of other projects going on. All of it's community science based. Basically, their mission is to provide data and rigorous scientific evidence to conservation partners, state and federal agencies, a bunch of different organizations that are trying to do the on-the-ground applied conservation. And so Wild Utah works to fill those data gaps that those agencies need to make the right conservation implementation or the right management or to implement the right strategies. Of course, we could not do this without help from our state and federal agencies. We have the Division of Wildlife Resources as well as the U.S. Forest Service helping us on this project, and they are basically providing all the permitting. So they are the reason why we're able to go out and actually set up these cameras, but they're also the ones that are going to implement the conservation strategies that come from this work. And so we are very, very grateful for them and happy that they are working with us on this project. The Natural History Museum of Utah is another excellent partner. Usually this event, this training would be held at the Natural History Museum's forum, where we would all get together and go through this entire thing um, in person, and it would be usually it's a pretty fantastic event. You know, current circumstances, COVID-19, not making that a possibility this year. But even without hosting the event, the Natural History Museum has been instrumental in the implementation of this project. And Lisa Thompson has been with us from the get-go, coordinating the citizen science effort, coordinating the actual study design, every single aspect of this project the History Museum has been a part of, and we could not do this without them. And just in case the museum opens up before the exhibit closes, if you haven't had a chance to check out Nature All Around Us, it is the special exhibit at the Natural History Museum of Utah right now. It is a fantastic exhibit. It's all about the nature in the more urban and suburban areas of basically Utah and the Wasatch Front. And it goes all the way from the nature in your backyard to the nature on the wildland urban interface in the foothills. And our project is featured in that exhibit. So if you have a chance to check it out, I highly recommend doing it. It's an awesome, awesome exhibit. And then last but definitely not least, Salt Lake City, specifically their Trails and Natural Lands division, have been amazing partners to work with. Roughly 60 to 65 of our locations are actually in the Salt Lake Valley, and they're spread out through all these different green spaces. And the Trails and Natural Lands division has not only taken many of those cameras in the past 2 years and actually implemented them, maintained them, set them up, gathered all the data for them. They've also allowed us to basically work in these green spaced areas. So we have permission through them to go to these places and set up these cameras. And so without them, our work in Salt Lake City would not be possible. So we can't thank them enough. Okay, so let's kind of get into the background of the project now. Like I said, we are working just predominantly along this Wasatch Mountain Wildland Urban Interface. And so let's get into what we mean by a wildland urban interface, or a WUI. You'll hear me say WUI a lot. And so what a WUI is anywhere where human development meets or intermingles with undeveloped land. I really like this definition because it not only specifies that a wildland urban interface can be where undeveloped land, say like a wilderness area, comes in contact with the neighborhood or comes in contact with the city. Those are, of course, wildland urban interfaces, but the intermixing between those two, because humans will then go from where there's a bunch of housing into these wilderness areas. And that in itself, that intermingling between humans and undeveloped land, that also creates aspects of a wildland urban interface. It creates these little intermixed areas where humans might not be physically altering the habitat through development, but they're altering the habitat through the traffic and through the recreation that's going on in there. And so you can't really define a WUI without including that intermingling that goes beyond the development stage. And so then to basically classify this as a land cover across the entire United States, or at least the lower 48 United States, it covers about 10% of the land area, which is a fairly small number, but it's highly concentrated with people. And in fact, about a third of the entire United States population lives within what could be classified as a wildland urban interface, either that direct interface, that yellowy thing that you'll see on the next graph, or the intermix that is basically where that's interspersed, kind of people coming in, people coming out, but not necessarily altering and developing the habitat 100%. So in the Wasatch, we have a very peculiar wildland urban interface in that our wildland urban interface is pretty unique and it's pretty stark. So in fact, 50% of our total population lives along one wildland urban interface. It's one of the longest stretches of continuous wildland urban interfaces in the United States, and it's the Wasatch Mountains. Basically, from the start of the Wasatch to the end of the Wasatch is one giant wildland urban interface. And along that interface, roughly 1.3 million people call that interface home. And so that's about 50% of our total population. And to add to that, roughly 9 million people visit the Wasatch National Forest every single year. That is equal to all 5 of our national parks combined. And so we get more visitation to the Wasatch than we do to any of our national parks. And in fact, the traffic to all 5 of them combined barely matches what we see just in the Wasatch alone. And according to the Forest Service, this is the most highly recreated national forest in the entire country. Granted, it's also one of the largest national forests in the entire country, but it is also the most highly recreated national forest in the entire country. So it really is a landmark wildland-urban interface that we can use to study what's going on here and potentially answer questions about what's going on all throughout the United States and throughout the world. And then add on to all of that, that the state that the Wasatch Mountains are in, Utah, is the second fastest population in the entire United States. It's the second fastest growing population. And in fact, that data is from 2018. If we go all the way back to the previous decade and we look at how fast each state has grown over those 10 years, Utah is the fastest growing state in the entire country. So not only do we have a ton of people living on this interface, we have a ton of people visiting this national forest, we also have more than any other state people coming in to increase both of those numbers. And so it's really this pretty stark, amazing dynamic that we have the opportunity to study through this project. And so this is that map I was kind of alluding to before. You'll notice that this is basically what a wildland-urban interface looks like if you are a geographer or if you're looking at a map. And so what you see here is the actual interface itself is designated as this yellow line that runs down this map. And that is the continuous part that goes all the way from the northern reaches of the Wasatch down to the southern reaches. And that does not break from one side all the way to the other side, which is pretty incredible. You don't see that in a lot of different areas. But not only that, when we look at our study area, so we've kind of mapped it out here. It's basically canyons A through G. So this is City Creek Canyon all the way down to Little Cottonwood Canyon right here. These are the main study canyons for our area. And what you'll notice is that if you look in each canyon's individual little section, you'll see these little interspersed areas of intermix and low density housing with vegetation cover, no housing and lots of vegetation cover. This is this perfect little gradient of wildland-urban interface that we are allowed to study just by looking at this one area. We get all of these different mixes, and so we can look at what's going on in each one of these separate areas just by studying this one little patch of the Wasatch Mountains. And so then to kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about where the idea for this project came from, the first people that started talking about what to do as far as conserving the Wasatch came really out of this Mountain Accord process. This was a process with a bunch of legislatures, a lot of nonprofit organizations, including Wild Utah. All of these different organizations got together and started making this project, or started putting together this Mountain Accord. And really what came from this Mountain Accord was a bunch of these data gaps or mission statements that needed to be filled before we could really start implementing conservation strategies here in the Wasatch. But instead of implementing those strategies, they really just kind of left them as open questions. And that wasn't because they didn't want to, it's just because the resources weren't in place. And so like I said, they really did a great job of framing the questions that needed to be answered. But as far as the implementation of addressing those questions, that wasn't really in the works yet. And so to kind of outline what exactly they were looking for, they really had no idea about a lot of abundance trends in the Wasatch. We don't know how each species is doing over time. We don't know how their behavior is changing in response to humans. And we have no idea how they're utilizing the habitat in the Wasatch. Like I said, the Wasatch's habitat is this really nice patchwork of undeveloped and developed land here and there and here and there. We want to understand how wildlife are using that matrix of different habitats, and we currently don't know that. And all of this is really thrown on its head when you throw into the mix human activity. And so not only do we not have baseline information for this, but we have no idea how it reacts with human activity. And so that is basically the foundation of this project. This is how this project got started, is how can we design something that addresses these three issues in response to human activity. And the way we decided to address this was by using camera traps. And so the first awesome thing about camera traps is that you get amazing photos of wildlife. And so these are just some of the best photos from the last 2 years. This photo of a moose was the front page of the Salt Lake Tribune when they did an article on us. I love these other photos of the coyote. These are this is one of my only not nighttime photos of skunk, and we happen to get 4 of them in a row. You can barely see the 4th one right down there. And then we get plenty of action photos of deer. Deer kind of steal the show as far as what we see in the cameras from year to year. But let's talk a little bit about why we use camera traps. They not only get amazing photos of mountain lion like we see right here, but they are non-invasive. And that is really kind of one of the biggest reasons why we use cameras. The first year of my PhD, I spent it in northeastern Turkey studying Eurasian brown bear, Eurasian lynx, and gray wolf. And this really strange ecosystem where there were high densities of these predators, but really low densities of prey or any other animals. And so we needed to understand how that was affecting these populations. And we decided to do that by live trapping, or basically GPS collaring. So you have to actually capture the animal, put a GPS collar on them, and monitor where they go. And this gives you some incredible data that you can't get in any other way. But as I've really noted, it is an invasive process. And the animals that are affected, they do have a lasting impact on them. And so when I just came back to Utah and wanted to start this project, I didn't really want to do a project like that. I wanted to be a little bit more non-invasive, where I wasn't altering the behavior of any individual animal. I was letting them basically live their own lives, act the way they would, and I wanted to be able to study them in that kind of natural setting. And so that's one of the reasons we use cameras, is to provide that non-invasive way to study wildlife. Another one, and we'll get into this in a little more detail later, is that they gather tons of data, absolutely tons of data. And to just kind of give you an example, I have lived in the Wasatch my entire life. I've hiked here, I've camped here. I try to spend every weekend I can, when it's possible, to be out in the backcountry in some way. In that entire time, I have seen two wild mountain lions. One was dead, unfortunately, but the other one was just a blur, ran right past me, and it really spooked me out. But just 2 wild mountain lion in 27 years, where with camera traps, in just the 2 years that we've been implementing this project, we have nearly 300 individual photos of mountain lion. And so the amount of data we're able to gather with cameras, it blows any other research method out of the water. And so that's really one of the main reasons we use these as well. So let's kind of get into kind of the framework and where community science and scientific research fit into this master plan we have. And so the main thing we're trying to do is address data gaps. We have data gaps in the wild of the Wasatch Mountains, and we don't really know what's going on in a lot of these areas. And that isn't hindering us from having sound conservation management tools, sound conservation strategies. This is what we need to do to answer those questions. This is what we need to do to make it so that we can start implementing conservation strategies on the ground. And so the way we're doing that is we're bridging those data gaps by answering ecological questions through scientific research. And so this scientific research aspect, this is the aspect that my PhD thesis is really focused on, is how can we use ecological questions based in scientific research to apply that to management tools and strategies on the ground. And so to kind of get into that a little bit, the major question we are trying to answer with this research is how can we manage the CWR wildlife community in the face of increasing anthropogenic development? basically, how can we manage the wildlife that live in the Wasatch as human development increases? We know that that's going to be a thing, so we need to be able to address specific questions. We need to be able to answer these specific questions so that we can implement the strategies that we need to conserve them in the future. And so one of these questions is simply just how species in the Central Wasatch Range, or CWR, respond to varying degrees of human development. Simply, how are the wildlife in this area responding to all of these different types of human developments? Do some species react positively, some react negatively, some have no effect? Can we quantify that so we can identify potential problem species that might have an issue with continued development versus those that might be more resilient? The second one is, can we identify behavioral adaptations from these mammal species inhabiting this landscape? And if we can do that, we can identify, once again, these species that are susceptible to human development because they do not have the behavioral plasticity or the ability to adapt. And on the flip side, we can identify the species that are adapting well and are altering their behavior in response to these different changes. And then finally, can we identify the most key habitat areas located on the Wasatch? This is both important habitat, but also habitat that currently isn't functioning as key habitat for certain species, but may be able to with restoration efforts in the future. And really with that, we're trying to look at areas that might be connecting two patches of really nice habitat. Okay, so that's kind of the scientific research aspect, but now this is where the community engagement aspect comes in. And so in order to answer these questions, we need a ton of data. And this is not something that a single research team could do on their own. In fact, we'd need hundreds and hundreds of people to gather the amount of data that we need to actually answer these questions. And so that gets us back to why we use cameras. Like we said, they gather tons of data, but only if you have the manpower to implement all of those processes and to set up all of those cameras. And so that is where you come in, and that is why you are so vital to this project. Is not only are you helping us design it through, and are you helping us basically implement it and analyze this data, you are on the ground helping gather this data. The most important aspect of the project is actually gathering the data, and we could not do that without your participation. So a huge thank you to the 2018 and 2019 community scientists. We have been absolutely blown away to the point where when we bring this up to anyone and tell them just how good our volunteer base is, it blows them completely away. I've gone to international, national conferences, all of that type of stuff, told them about the effort that you guys have given through 2018 and 2019, and everyone is just floored by what you've been able to do and what we've been able to accomplish over these last 2 years. And we can only hope that 2020 gets us even better, because we've improved in the past 2 years, and so we're looking to get even better in 2020. But really can't say this enough. You're going to hear this in every single video. Thank you so much for participating. This project is not possible without you. So I really hope that you tune into the past results video to see kind of the fruits of your labor and to see how we are planning on using the data that you are gathering and how we're planning on accrediting you for the research that you are doing. So then let's kind of just summarize what we were able to do these past 2 years. So in 2018, it was our pilot year. We set up 205 camera stations. 160 were in the Wasatch Mountains, 45 were in Salt Lake City, and it covered roughly 1,000 square kilometers. From that, excluding data that we weren't able to use based on like timestamps and stuff like that, we got usable data back from over 90% of these cameras. That is incredible. That is better than most research studies without community science impact at all. So that is with the research team 24/7 being a part of this project. That is a higher percentage than a lot of those studies. And so we got usable data from over 180 cameras. It was absolutely incredible. And I hope you can, like I said, tune into those past results so we can start showing you what we've been able to do with that data. All of the results that I'm going to show you are from 2018. We still haven't gone through all of 2019 because we did so much better than we did the previous year. So that kind of leads us in to 2019. We upped the number of sites to 234. We were a little worried about doing this because we had such a good pilot year. We didn't want to ruin something that was already working, but we added more sites and everyone came through. Our percentage of sites that came back with usable data was higher than 90% from the previous year. So we actually did better than we did in 2018, which I don't understand how we could have, because I thought that was just about as good as it gets. But we did better than we did in 2018 in 2019. So that was absolutely incredible. We still haven't gotten through looking at all this data. We're getting very close, but we hope to basically implement the same models we have from 2018 and on the 2019 data as soon as we can get that uploaded. And so, because we did so well in 2018, we did so well in 2019, we're going to up it even more in 2020. And so we are upping it to 246 sites now. And so we're approaching that 250 mark, which is pretty incredible, something I never thought I would be able to say that we're doing. And not only that, we're going to keep a subset of cameras up for a longer period of time. This does not apply to anybody that's working on this project during the summer, but you'll probably hear information about it throughout the field season as we make preparations for keeping some of these cameras up. And so just to kind of outline that, we're keeping 55 sites active from May until November. So that is basically from September until November. Once you take down those cameras, we're gonna find a way to get 55 sites up again from May until November. And then the Utah's Hopewell Zoo is going to help us keep 25 of those sites up year round. So this is gonna be our most extensive monitoring year yet. We're really excited about it. And we can't believe how much this project has grown and how amazing all of you are that have contributed to this for the past 2 years and that are contributing as a new volunteer in 2020. So this wouldn't be a camera trapping project without showing photos from the actual cameras. That's one of the best things that we get from this project. So this is just an example. I kind of call this my baby slide because we got the little fawn right here. We've got the kittens, the bobcat kittens, super cute, in City Creek Canyon. And then we've got this little baby coyote that's going down, and I think another trail in City Creek, actually. We got some other really awesome photos. It's not every day that you get a juvenile northern goshawk that stops in front of your camera, so it's always good to kind of show pictures of that. It's still to this day one of my favorite photos. We got this back at the first year, 2018. This was from last year, 2019. This is a pregnant mountain lion. And what's so great about this is we could tell it was a late stage of the pregnancy. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, she gave birth and we saw her and the cub walking down the same trail. So that was pretty fantastic to see. We've got this little coyote in midair. And then of course, these jumping deer are always something to take a look at. All right, then there's just a couple more. It's super difficult to get really good photos of raccoon. And so when we got this one standing up, I was like, yep, we got to save that. Got to put it up on there. Not even the highest quality, but it's so hard to get good photos of raccoons. This photo of a mountain lion was actually from a little bit ago, I think before 2018, but it's still to this day one of my favorite all-time photos. This is one of our better photos of an American black bear, and we do get black bear here. This was actually in Lamb's Canyon. And then one of my new all-time favorite photos, this coyote decided to drag around a severed deer head with it for a while, and so that was actually pretty incredible to see. Kind of gross, but also pretty cool. Just keep going. I liked this photo because these deer do not seem to mind. They must hang out with this little cat all the time, or at least the cat doesn't mind that the deer are there. This is actually a park in Salt Lake City, so it's kind of cool to see that we have that much wildlife out in Salt Lake. And then, like I said, really difficult to get raccoon photos, and so anytime you get a good one, you got to post it. And these are 3 raccoons wrestling right in front of the camera, so we had to definitely capture that onto this video as well. Okay, so that is the first video in our series. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you tune in to the rest of them.